Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our last Free Friday webinar of the fall. It's good to see all of you. We are being sponsored this week by Stress Stop, and we thank them very much for making it possible. I'm going to turn the reins over to Jim Porter, who is the head of Stress Stop, and he's going to talk to us for a couple of minutes. Jim, take it away. You are muted.
There. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I made a little 4-minute demo video. Last time I tried to walk everybody through our web platform in 5 minutes, and I decided that I'm just way too verbose, and this really just kind of sums things up. So I'm so happy to be here. I recognize Joel Bennett. He's a fantastic guy. He's really in good hands with whatever he has to say. And I unfortunately don't know the other people on the presentation today, but thanks for letting me sponsor the program. We love doing business with EAPs, and this is a platform, a mental well-being platform that we created just for EAPs. So I'm going to roll this video, and Julie, can you see it okay?
Yes, I can.
Let's take a moment to talk about mindfulness. Specifically, should you happen to wake up in the middle of the night and want to go back to sleep again, this is a great exercise to do to try and bring you back into slumberland.
One of the most important techniques you can learn for managing stress in the workplace and therefore preventing burnout is called cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is the therapeutic practice of thinking about your thinking.
For the most part, when we leave the present moment, we're going off into the future, and we're usually thinking about things that make us anxious, that worry us, like what might happen tomorrow or the next day or a month from now or even a year from now. We get upset, we get worried about these things that usually never come to pass.
Welcome to our 10-minute yoga class.
Learning how to do deep breathing is an easy way to lower your stress in just minutes.
What I want us to understand is that our healing and our wellness and our growth is an arc. It's not a moment, it's an arc. That's why we keep track, because it's so subtle sometimes. Sometimes it's so slow that we haven't realized that we've made significant changes in our lives.
Think about it. What's the first thing to go out the window when you get busy? It's all the things you do to manage stress. Stress has a way of fooling us into thinking that we don't have time for self-care. Just when we need it the most, that's when we do it the least. When you talk about stress, the way your body moves, just give me something to bite into and chew, because it sort of feels like that would help relieve the tension. And in fact, it can. Except that among the sources of stress in many of our lives are issues of ill health and weight control that's not in control because of all the eating that we're doing that we wish we weren't doing. So immediate, brief distraction from stress by chewing on all the wrong things, ultimately it feeds greater stress in our lives. It's a cycle we want to break.
Además de estas técnicas, también hay hábitos a diario que pueden ayudarnos a manejar el estrés de otra forma.
Thank you, everybody, for tolerating that 5-minute commercial. That's the longest commercial I've ever seen.
Thank you so much for joining us and for sponsoring us and making this all possible. We're very grateful.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we're doing something a little different today. We actually have a panel. So I'm gonna just do a very quick intro and then zip it so that they can get started. We have 3 folks with us today. We have Joel Bennett, who some of you might recognize from his appearances with the Wednesday Wellness. He's the president and CEO of Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems. We have Mark Attridge, who's the president of Attridge Consulting, who has done webinars with us in the past. And we also have Julie Stitch, who's the vice president with the International Foundation of Employee Business Plans. Thank you, welcome, and take it away.
So Mark's gonna show the slides here, but I want to acknowledge Jim. Thank you for the nice comment. Just for those of you who don't know about Stress Stop, I've known Jim for 20 years, and he has a very good heart and a commitment to refining materials. So the materials he shared with you have been worked on, refined, and developed and produced over many, many years. So please check out Stress Stop.
Thanks,
So,
Joe.
yeah, no, my pleasure. Mark, we can see both slides, not just the main slide. Can you just show it in general slide view and not just the next slide? While we're starting here, I want to acknowledge that this topic is one that we've talked about before in Wednesday Wellness. There is a lack of research, a lack of knowledge on how leaders at all levels, executive, managerial, and supervisory, perceive the employee assistance benefit. We really have no full understanding of that. As a researcher, my hope is that this presentation kind of changes the conversation, and that we really start talking about what leaders know, what they need to know, what they don't know, and why they don't know. You will be surprised as to how many executives who are paying for the EA benefit have no clue. They don't even know if they have an EA benefit. What's that about? Mark, can you please share your screen now so we can go through the deck, or should I? Okay, I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. And you hopefully will be able to see. Can you all see the slides then? My slide? People?
We see right now it's like a Zoom. It's all the boxes, not the slides.
Huh, then that's on your side. I'm sharing my screen. Let's see here, hold on. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through this, Mark, and I'll do the best I can to stay on. So what do leaders and managers know about the EAP? What should they know about the EAP? Why should they know it? And where are there disconnects? There'll be 2 perspectives here. I'll be sharing on data from regional, rural, and semi-rural areas of central New York. And then Julie, with the International Foundation of Employee Benefits Plans, will be sharing national data from professionals working in the benefits industry. I'm very excited because these 2 different perspectives are needed. Many of you work in regional areas. Some of you work nationally. Some of you work even more locally. And we have to make sure that we understand that these perspectives vary. And in fact, you'll see a diversity of perspectives on this issue of leader perceptions. What are the disconnects? We may know what national data tell us about EA utilization. We may know what professionals in benefits tell us. And again, that's the IFEBP and the work of Julie, which is outstanding. It's amazing how much research and the work that Julie's been doing on surveys, which we wanted to bring to you today. But do we really know what leaders know about mental health and substance use disorder benefits? And can we do more to create alignment and knowledge? So for me, I really think this webinar is a call to action, and that everyone listening here starts having conversations at the highest possible levels, because we are in a mess when it comes to mental health and substance use disorders in the workplace. So this first part is about research we've been doing at Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems. Mark, myself, and Aldridge in our office have been doing a lot of data analysis. And again, this is on Central New York State. I want to give you an upfront summary. Leaders report losing valuable, productive time dealing with mental health related exposures amongst their employees. When we ask leaders in a confidential anonymous survey, they are very, very much concerned and are taking time dealing with things that rise up to them that they hear about. We also know that smaller organizations are the most vulnerable to financial loss because of mental health and substance use disorder. All it takes is one employee to go into treatment if you're in a small business. Leader perceptions of EAP vary by size and type of organization. We know that for-profit organizations are most likely to know about and see their EAP as effective. Smaller organizations are most likely to have no clue about their EAP, and even if they have one. But we also know that organizational size correlates with perceived effectiveness of EAP, especially for vendor related rather than an insurance carved in. The insurance EAP are seen as more effective, but vendor EAPs appear to be more effective the more that people know about it. Leaders with effective vendor EAP are more financially optimistic. I think that's an interesting finding, that somehow the people who are in leadership positions who feel that their vendor EAP is effective are also more financially optimistic about the future of their company. What I think is going on here is that there might be a possible inertia, or what we call satisficing or used to in larger organizations regarding EAP attitudes. That is, leaders in larger organizations are socially distant from the benefit. They're socially distant from the EAP. So you'll see that they're not necessarily not interested. They just think, hey, we got it covered, check the box, we're done. So our sample of leaders you can see here by different type and size. And you can see about their awareness on the right side, their awareness and their perceived effectiveness of the EAP. So fully 41% of our small sample, again, this is a small regional study, 41% either don't know they have an EAP, and you can see that's a good significant size, or they think it's ineffective. And then you can see the percent that see it as effective. So managers and leaders are having to deal with mental health exposures, but smaller and nonprofit are particularly vulnerable. We asked them, how many lost working hours do you have because you're being drawn in to deal with employee health concerns? And you can see what those health concerns are on the right, in order: employee stress and burnout being number one, mental health, and so on. On average, in this sample, respondents report losing about 39% of their working week, and a month actually, dealing with these issues. And you can see how it breaks down, that we even have some 10% losing 75% of their time having to deal with these issues, up to 75%. We did a financial analysis thanks to the work of Mark and others, and we looked at the relationship between the number of these exposures, again, stress, mental health, sleep, general health, So that's on the horizontal axis. And then we were able to look at annual cost due to lost employee productivity because we asked about wages and we asked about number of employees. On the left, you see workplaces. Each one of those dots represents a different workplace with a different leader. And you can see in less employee leaders of workplaces that have less than 100 employees, there's a positive slope. In these smaller workplaces, the more mental health related exposures, the more lost labor costs. I mean, it was just phenomenal for us to see this data statistically. Now, if you turn to the right side, in larger organizations, you'll see there's no slope. That leaders of larger workplaces appear impervious. Now, I want you to be aware of the financials here. On the left, at the very top, we're talking about $400,000 a year. On the right, we're talking about $9 million a year, which is just about size, right? So everybody's focused on how much people are losing in the larger organizations, but leaders, it's not that they don't care, they just don't know about it. They're not aware of it. It doesn't hurt them. They're buffered. They have HR in between them. They have benefits in between them. They have managerial layers in between them. But in those smaller organizations, it hurts those small business, small organizational owners. And I'm talking about nonprofit especially. Nonprofit especially. The people who are on the front line dealing with mental health issues in their community. They are hurting significantly financially. So this is an important data point because it tells us that we cannot think about leader perceptions of the EAP across the board. We have to think about the size of the organization and whether it's private or public sector. It varies significantly. So we wanted to know, do they have an EAP? What type of EAP do they have? And do they think it's effective? So that's the rest of the slides here from me, and then I'll turn it over to Julie. First, I want to thank the International Foundation of Employee Benefits Plans because we published this article with some of the same data in an issue earlier this year. And in that data that we shared, we found that if leaders report having an EAP, they're more likely to have everything else. I want to say to those of you on the call, when you have an EA program in an organization, it's the tip of the spear. They're more likely to have all these other mental health programs in place. And it's one of the most neglected and underknown. It's not just known, that's important. So that's what we found there. Now I want to talk about whether or not these leaders had any awareness of the EAP. And you'll see here, nonprofit, government, and for-profit. And we looked at whether they knew they had a program, whether it was an insurance carved an EAP or a vendor EAP. In nonprofit, 53% don't even know if they have it, and 6% it's insurance, and 41% have vendor. In government, you have more likely to have vendor, and for-profit, it goes even more. So what's important here is that there are apparent differences in this regional sample in the type of EAP. And as we move from nonprofit to government to for-profit, we have greater awareness that there is even awareness that they know they have an EAP. Then we looked at it by organizational size. Here we found the larger the organization, the more likely to have a perceived effective vendor EAP. And smaller organizations are more likely to indicate they don't know. So again, you can see the sizes here, 1 to 49, 50 to 99, 100 to 500, and 500 or more. So look at that. Don't know? Well, the larger the organization, the more likely they're going to know or think that it's effective. Then you can see here what insurance EA looks like. But look at vendor. The vendor EAP seems to be picking up more awareness with size. And there's a lot of reasons for that we can get into. And then finally, perceived EAP effectiveness and financial optimism. We asked, how would you forecast the financial health of your organization in the next 6 months? From getting worse to getting better. And we looked at how effective your EAP. So we're looking at the relationship between perceived effectiveness of the EA and financial optimism. And here's what we found, that those who experienced their EA as effective felt more optimistic about the future financials of their organization. This is for a vendor. There's no relationship with insurance, but with vendor there is. And so the average of the vendor tends to be lower than the average of the insurance carve-in. For those with a vendor EAP, greater perceived effectiveness of EAP correlates with greater financial optimism. Those who feel the EAP as more effective also see more financial growth. But felt insurance EAP effectiveness is unrelated to optimism, even though it's higher. So I'll turn it over to Mark to comment before we turn over to Julie very quickly, and then we'll have to go to Julie very quickly, and I'll keep working the slides. Mark?
Sure. Well, thanks, Joel. Again, it was a great opportunity to work with Joel. We've been doing projects for, I don't know, 10 or 20 years together in wellness and EAP and benefits areas. This study was interesting because so few studies, actually any research in the EAP field, looks at the smaller organizations. You know, we had under 50, under 100, under 500. Many of the big studies you see from benefits groups, you know, consider small organizations anything under 500. And so we actually have a really good sample here of what the Bureau of Labor Statistics is showing, that, you know, many EAPs now, from a third to almost 50% of under 50 in America have an EAP now, which is, you know, 90% of all organizations are under 50 people. So this small employer market is really the future of the whole growth of our industry in the US and other bigger countries, because of the demographics of that's where all the business people and the employees work. They work for small firms. At least half of America works for a small company. So getting them to be aware of how EAPs do things and how beneficial they can be and how they can be linked to business success are some of the themes that I think this study was showing. And Joel and others have published in the American Journal of Health Promotion, and so did I, in the same issue on the small employer Bureau of Labor Statistics data. I did a webinar on small is big for EAP recently. Perhaps some of you went to that webinar on the future of small business and EAPs. And so I think what's interesting and important here is the links between nonprofits and vendors and insurance kinds of EAPs. Typically, the embedded insurance EAPs, people aren't necessarily aware of them because it's coming through disability benefits or health benefits or other kinds of benefits, and it's not directly promoted. And so I think that the type of the EAP is really more an issue of promotion and awareness than of are they effective or not. We know they're effective when the counselors present and work with people. It's just the utilization rates are like 1% as opposed to, you know, 5 to 10% for a vendor EAP. And I think the bigger point here was what kind of reporting, what kind of trainings, what kind of interactions can EAPs do to show their data, show their utilization, show their effectiveness results, to remove this social distance between leaders, especially at big companies that have vendors and have a lot of information, a lot of people to respond to. And so this social distance dynamic can be changed by EAPs with their own communication tactics, their own consulting with managers, with HR, and hopefully with leadership if given the chance. I think one of the ways you can open the door to having that chance to talk to your customers, to talk to leadership, is to conduct these kinds of financial impact analyses, or at least presenteeism, absenteeism analyses. We have the Workplace Outcome Suite tool that's free, and about half of the field is collecting data on the Workplace Outcome Suite. Those kind of results are things that business people and leaders are interested in. And so that's why we put them in our study with these leaders in New York. And we have a lot of details you can read about this. Joel and I have published a number of studies. All of the links here are free to get. And we just published a new article with Julie's group again, Benefits Magazine, coming out about how to leverage an EAP and what leaders are supposed to do. So we're trying to promote this more generally, and we look forward to your comments as the talk goes on. And now I'd like to introduce Julie. She's done an amazing amount of work as an architect at this organization for, I think, almost 25 or 30 years. And more recently, in the last 10 years, they've been involved in developing a number of very high quality empirical projects where they've asked their members to answer a lot of questions about their benefits with an expressed focus, especially since COVID, on mental health in the workplace. So she's going to talk about some of the highlights from that work.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, Joel. I appreciate that both of you asked me to be here, and grateful to Julie and the other Julie for having me be part of this discussion today. So I want to start by sharing a little bit about who we are and then share some data. As Joel said, we have done some survey work with our members who are employers, and so I want to share that data with you. So now, if you want to go to the next slide, Joel, that would be great. Okay, so I suspect that many of you may not be aware of who we are. We're the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans. We have a really long name, I will say that. And other than that, we are a 69-year-old nonprofit educational association, and our mission is to educate about employee benefits. And our members represent all roles in the benefits industry in both the US and in Canada. So when I'm saying all roles, what do I mean? I mean people who serve as staffers in the HR or benefits departments for companies or for a public employee entity like a city or a county or a state. Our members might be trustees who serve for public sector health or retirement systems, or trustees who serve with union benefit plans, or they may be the professional service providers who work with benefits like attorneys or consultants or brokers or actuaries or TPAs or investment managers. So we have 30,000 members. And we say that they represent about 25 million lives if you look at all of the employees that they directly impact as well as their family members. And so our benefits education is delivered in a wide variety of ways, including in-person and virtual conferences and courses and workshops. We have webcasts. We have our blog and a podcast. We have our magazine, as Mark and Joel mentioned. The one that we have for the US is called Benefits Magazine, and we do our survey work. So we've been doing education on wellness for a long time, including mental well-being. And for what we do for our survey work, it's a little bit different than what Joel does. We do benchmarking surveys where we reach out to our members and we ask them about the types of benefits they offer, how those benefit plans are designed, what trends they're seeing, and what concerns they have. And the people who respond to these surveys are those who work most directly with their benefit plan. So I will say that we do not get responses typically from the CEO or the C-suite or top management. We get the actual benefits manager or the trustee who's responding. So for the past several years, as Mark mentioned, we've been looking at mental health. We started with focus group work, and that helped us shape our initial survey questionnaire. We use variations on that same questionnaire each time we redo this survey to get consistent data. Our first one was in 2016. We've been doing this every couple of years. Our most recent was conducted in 2021, and that's the data I'll be sharing today. We are looking at updating that survey and deploying it again next year. So this particular survey was deployed in April of 21. It was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. We received more than 400 responses, 337 from the US, and that's what I'll be sharing. We had people responding from over 20 different industries, and they ranged in size from fewer than 50 employees to more than 10,000 employees. And I do have a link to the landing page here. Our reports are available only to members, but if you're interested in seeing a full copy of the report, let me know and I'd be happy to send it on to you. So I will be talking about the prevalence of mental health conditions, the types of benefits employers are offering, including EAPs, and the barriers and challenges that employers and employees are facing. So the first area I want to cover is the type of conditions being experienced in the workplaces that are represented by our respondents and how prevalently. And I will mention that this prevalence data may be primarily anecdotal because we found out in this survey that only 17% of our respondents who took the survey told us they've conducted any type of analysis of these particular issues. So that's kind of in line with what Joel and Mark were talking about is, you know, how much do employers really understand of what they're looking at, what their workforce is going through. So, but most of the respondents told us that depression's very prevalent in their organizations. When they said prevalent, we asked them if it was very prevalent or prevalent. We also saw a lot of anxiety disorders, sleep deprivation, and other types of conditions here, as you can see in the slide. And in line with the rather low percentage of respondents who told us that they'd conducted an analysis, a significant proportion of these respondents told us they weren't sure what conditions were present. And I will just say, again, this is a theme that we have seen through our survey work with this particular survey on mental health. Right from the outset in 2016, we have seen high percentages of our employers who are responding, and these are the ones who work day to day with their benefits. They have responded not sure to a lot of the questions that we're asking about mental health. They're providing assistance. They know they do that. They know what types of benefits they offer, but they're not necessarily sure about the depth and breadth of these conditions and what they as employers can and should be doing. So our data shows that there's a lot of room for improvement, and thank goodness you're all here to help us, right? So we also asked our respondents to tell us about their worker stress levels, and you can see that 96% said they were very stressed. Not surprising, this was in the midst of the pandemic. And I also want to mention that any of this, again, it's the employers or the individual representing the employer who's taking this survey. We did not go out and ask the employees what they are thinking. This is all what employers are perceiving that they've seen or experienced or measured throughout their workforce. So the next item we wanted to talk about is workforce impact, and that's what Joel was talking about with his survey as well, right? So you can see that respondents, 80% or more of respondents said that mental health or substance use issues have impacted overall job performance, morale, physical health, absenteeism, tardiness, presenteeism, which you all know as the inability to focus on work. And these issues also strongly impact a worker's relationship with their other coworkers, how well they get along. And this was another area where we saw great uncertainty among respondents. We saw on each of these issues about 1/4 to 1/3 of our respondents did not know the impact of mental health on these workplace performance categories. Next is barriers. So we know that workers, managers, and companies face barriers to being successful in addressing mental health challenges. Top two, as you can see here, which again are cited by the employers, are tied to workers' concern about confidentiality and the security in their job. And another barrier involving workers includes the sense that they either don't acknowledge they have a problem or they're not ready to address their problem at this point. Other challenges for workers that's cited less frequently were lack of access to care, whether it be because of time or money. The other barriers, of course, involve managers. It could be discomfort among supervisors in addressing the issue with the worker, how I might see something, but I don't know how to go talk to them. I don't know if I should. There's concern about breaching their workers' privacy. And in a few cases, respondents cited other types of management concerns surrounding purview. For example, there are some managers who think it's not it's not my responsibility, it's not our responsibility, this is a personal issue. They may not be sure of the effectiveness of any type of program, and they may not even acknowledge problems. Like, we don't have any problems here in our company, everybody's doing really well. You know, certainly Joel and Mark have talked about how important leadership support is for success, for mental health help in the workplace, and for workers to feel comfortable enough to talk about their challenges and to seek help. So again,
I'm gonna make
yeah.
a quick comment here, just
Yeah.
to say that on this slide, it's somewhat consistent with what we found, is that, as you remember from our data, if it's a vendor EAP, not a carved-in insurance EAP, there seems to be more awareness and less of the don't knows. And what you're seeing here is the vendor tends to have more managerial consulting, right, than the carved-in insurance does. So I want to put in a note about that in terms of these items that are in orange. But I'll back to you.
No, great. Thank you for that. So again, we were having struggles with this particular one as well, knowing that, seeing that 29% of our respondents didn't know what the barriers were. So taking a deeper dive here, because I mentioned earlier, we keep our survey questionnaire as consistent as we can. We can kind of track what we're seeing from one survey to the next. So from a historical perspective, we actually noticed some notable increases since 2018 in discomfort among supervisors and addressing issues, as well as management concerns about privacy. So sadly, that wasn't reducing, that was actually increasing between 2018 and 2021. And then we looked at our larger employers. We took a cohort of them that had 1,000 or more workers, and they were more likely to cite worker fear about confidentiality and worker fear that admitting a problem may impact job security. So what the next slide is some discussion that I'd appreciate Mark and Joel talking about, and any of you chiming in, the experience that you are seeing as you work in this industry.
Yeah, we only have a little bit of time here, but if anybody wants to put in the chat box for the record, how does this prevalence data reflect what you're seeing? And what are your clients doing to combat each of these issues, right? The prevalence, the impact, and the barriers. And should they care about all three of these, prevalence, impact, or barriers, or which one? Is it the barriers they should address, the impact they should address? But we don't have a lot of time for a comment. I'll just turn it back to you, Julie. But we do appreciate people sharing in the chat box if you have any thoughts about this. And that's sort of like our Wednesday Wellness, is getting more conversation. And we're always happy to do more on this topic in Wednesday Wellness. But I'll turn it back to you, Julie.
Okay, thank you. So next, I'll share about the conditions that are covered, the treatment benefits offered, and then I'll dive a little bit more into EAPs here. So first, if we're looking at the conditions that are covered by employer, on the next, you can see that respondents cover a wide variety of conditions. So top three, all at 69%, alcohol addiction, depression, and anxiety. And then covered at more than 60% are prescription drug addiction, bipolar disorder, and PTSD. And again, you can see here where 21% of our respondents didn't know which conditions were covered. So next, when we're looking at different types of treatment, I want to start with treatment options for mental health issues. Not surprisingly, most commonly covered are prescription drug therapies, and outpatient and inpatient treatment sessions with a medical professional or therapist for treatment in a hospital or clinic setting. Now, a now commonly offered benefit is telepsychiatry or virtual care. Of course, because of what happened through the pandemic, we've really seen an uptick in this being covered, and we think we'll see even more in 2024 as we move forward. So in the next area of preventive program offerings, by far and away, the most commonly offered benefit is an EAP. EAPs are tried and true. They've been a part of the benefits portfolio for a long time. And they're actually the #1 benefit that employers are offering for mental health across all ways of looking at it. Other types of preventive program offerings include incorporating this into their wellness program, and then having things like mindfulness, meditation, gratitude, appreciation tools and resources, including apps and journals, formal stress management programs, and less common, of course, as you can see, are PTSD awareness programs and Narcan at the work site. I think when we do this survey again in 24, we'll see a big uptick on Narcan. I'm hearing so many more work sites are keeping that available, which is sad, but it's needed, right? So let's take a deeper look at EAPs. So not surprisingly, throughout our survey, we see the larger employers, again, at 1,000 or more employees, offering various types of treatment and prevention benefits. And then if you look here at the bottom of the slide, you'll see our breakdown of EAP offering by employer size. It was 86% overall, and it's pretty consistent amongst most employer sizes, except for that smallest one Mark was talking about, right? Those small employers, and are they able to offer EAPs? Are they aware? We saw about 50% of those in that category that do offer EAPs. So next, I've got a list here of the most commonly offered services that employers are asking their EAPs to provide. These are all at the 80% mark or more. They all make sense, right? Assistance and counseling, a crisis hotline, referral support, legal financial assistance, and counseling for families. We did ask if these employers are making EAP access available to their family members of their employees, and most do. So on this next slide, you'll need a magnifying glass. I apologize for that, but what I wanted to do was list all of the services that we asked about being offered by EAPs, and then I also wanted to take a look at this by size of employers, so that you could see what we're looking at. Most of the here you've got the previously mentioned common services. Most are offered by at least a third of the other types of services, except the assistance for global workers, which makes sense since not all employers have a global footprint. And about half reported offering manager support, violence prevention support, disaster recovery support, on-site speakers. I suspect we'll see some uptick on these in the next time we do the survey. One of the things that I was kind of surprised about is the on-site speakers only being at about half. This is something at the foundation as an employer we take advantage of from our EAP. I personally have used the manager support when I've struggled, had some questions about employee issues, and I wish that was being offered by more. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But then when we're looking at by size, obviously we see some higher percentages for larger companies, but it really isn't universal across the board if you take a look at that, right? Some up and down. And obviously, of course, as you all well know, it depends on what the employer needs. But of course, I'd love to see all those percentages go up.
Yeah, let me comment here just quickly, Julie.
Yeah,
if you look at the support managers line, of all the items on here, that's the one that has the strongest linear relationship with size. So going back to what we said earlier about the smaller organizations, as you go higher, it tends to increase in percent of manager support.
Right. So more should be taking advantage of that. And one nice thing is we only had about 1% of our respondents didn't know which services were offered. So yay, yay on that. So moving on to utilization. So we've, traditionally we hear it's been roughly around 5% 5% over the years. So we asked about this. We asked them in 2021 to tell us what it was in 2019 pre-pandemic versus what it was now. You can see the average was about 7% in 2019, and it increased to about 9% in 21. Obviously, due to the pandemic and hopefully also perhaps to stigma's lessening stranglehold on people's willingness to talk about their challenge. And you can see that the average utilization was relatively similar no matter the employer size. So here's some more questions to think about, and if anyone is interested in putting things into the chat. These were things that, as I work with employers, these are things that I'm wondering about you that work with clients and with EAPs are seeing. So next, we've got some education and awareness offerings, and you can see that the most commonly provided are kind of the more traditional newsletters, published information. Approaches that are more personal are made available by fewer respondents, things like supervisor training, mental health first aid or crisis training, having peers or leadership discuss these issues. And I think this is reflective of the lingering stigma and discomfort surrounding these issues, but I really anticipate that we'll see growth in these areas in the next survey, because employers are recognizing and acknowledging the need for these services. And the one good thing that came out of the pandemic, in my opinion, is that it's lessened the stigma surrounding mental health, and people feel like they can talk about it a bit more. So here are some additional questions to think about. If only I had hours to ask you all and pick your brains. So I just wanted to share, one of the challenges that we all talk about, whether it's in you working day to day, every day with EAPs and with providing mental health assistance, and from us on the employer side, is why aren't EAPs used more? Certainly in the middle of a crisis or anxiety or depression, it makes sense that unfortunately the employee or the manager forgets that the EAP is there. Frustrating but true, but employers are really looking for ways to increase utilization. And, of course, promote it more frequently, talk about it more, communicate it more, instead of just only mentioning it in employee orientation. Hey, we have an EAP and we have life insurance. Keep reminding people that it's there. So we did ask our respondents to tell us what they're doing. And these are some of the quotes that they gave us. Some shared that they've more fully integrated and coordinated their EAP with their wellness program. One mentioned incorporating it more with their leave program. And then the last quote here on this slide reflects an ongoing challenge, finding ways to assure workers that their use of the EAP, the reason why they're using it, and the services they receive are truly confidential. I know employers talk about this and stress this in communications, but how do we get the worker to believe that? And one thing that we know works is having a trusted peer or someone who's an organizational leader, whether it's someone from the C-suite or someone who's just respected as a leader within the organization. If they start to talk about their own mental health journey and the help they've sought and how they use the EAP and other services and the help they got, that makes a huge difference. But how to get leaders to agree to do that is the big question.
So Julie, I'm gonna let this last question be here, and I'll let you and Mark continue the conversation on these questions.
Yeah,
and then we'll open it up because of our time, we want people to do that. So I'll review these questions and then we'll stop showing the screen. And then we'll have time at the end here because there's so much information we want to give. And we have a lot of people on who have a lot of experience. So questions for anyone: how can employers work with their EAP to increase utilization? And we talk about employers, we're talking about, as you can see, the managers, the leaders, but also from Julie's data, the people who work in benefits. And many of the IFEBP members are trustees of insurance plans, and a whole variety of lawyers and health underwriters. I mean, IFEBP members are of a diverse group who can help raise awareness. So a big part of our reason for bringing Julie in was maybe EPA and IFEBP can work together more to create that relationship so that we can help IFEBP members be more aware of EAP. Often utilization is seen as a benchmark for EAP success. What additional goals and benchmarks should employers and their EAPs put into place other than utilization? And how do we educate employers on EAP use at workplace and prevention levels beyond just focus on individual counselor case rates? So those are just some conversations to get us started. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Julie to take us out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks both to Joel and to Julie. I'm really impressed that Julie's organization is collecting all this kind of data and getting it from a wide range of employers. Many other reports in the industry typically focus on really big companies. And so they have a wide representation of size and regions and US and Canada. And so that's very positive. And I'm going to keep doing this and keep doing other trainings and webinars. I've been reading all the chat comments, and I'm really encouraged to see people interacting and asking questions. And I could answer a couple of the ones that have been done so far. I think one of the big themes here is the intense focus of employers and EAP reporting on case counseling of individuals getting counseling. That's a small slice of what most EAPs do. And I've been writing a series about that in the EPA journal, if you get it, called EAP Evidence. That's talking about all of the workplace, crisis care, management consulting, technology, prevention, preclinical services. And EAP is a lot more than just counseling. And so I think that's kind of one big message that we can start sharing more with your data, with your trainings, and actually creating ways to talk to managers and HR benefits people more frequently, I think could be a new almost business line of EAPs. Since the pandemic, many of these people have been asking EAPs in the US, who are part of industry organizations, for benefit
Well, I'm not, but it's good.
programs to support their managers,
the webinars for
leaders.
Have a
And so that kind of direct support to your customers, the ones who are your champions in EAPs, the ones who have answered this survey that Julie said, I think almost needs to be a coaching focus for EAPs. The fact that in our small sample data, a third of them didn't even know they had an EAP or didn't know how effective it was. For an industry that's as old and successful as ours, we're the most popular voluntary benefit in the United States and in most any other country. People buy us, they know we work, but they don't necessarily know how we work and why it works. So I think communicating a bit more with our employers and our purchasers would be a big step forward, especially when there are many apps and tools and techno things that are just a small slice of kind of preclinical prevention services, pretending that they're EAPs and having a lot of marketing to the marketplace about and to benefits people about, well, all you need is an app or an online counselor, and that's all you need. And they actually are ignoring the workplace to a large extent because they don't have staff and services and expertise to deal with addictions, to deal with trainings, to deal with crisis, which many of you are experts at for many years. And so I think one of the stories here is just to tell our story more strongly and more aggressively about we handle the worker and the workplace. It's a 1-2 punch. And I think if employers understand that, they're more open to talking about it. And if they understand it and talk about it to their employees, then their employees are more likely to use it. And then that looks good for everybody. And so I think the organizational side of this is the total audience that Julie was dealing with. And they're telling us a lot of good things in her slides. And so those are my kind of high level comments. Any other comments in chat we want to talk about? We've got another 5 minutes.
You do have a hand up, Mark.
Do I have a handout?
No, you
Oh,
have
handout.
you have a hand up.
Well, there's like 4 screens, so I'm not sure who it is.
Yeah, I
Susan,
see
would you
Susan.
like to unmute and ask your question?
Well, whoever
There.
it
Can
is,
you hear
go
me?
ahead. I can't see them.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I've been an EAP and I was an on-site EAP consultant for a large corporation for a lot of years, and now I'm an EAP for, Cigna, ComPsych in that regard. I'm not sure what you mean by vendor. Anyway, my work as an EAP in response to managers don't know how to approach employees. Here's what managers would come to me and say, I'm really worried about this employee, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. What can I say? What do I do? And so I really gave them guidance on, first of all, focus on performance and have you documented on what your concerns are about the person's performance. That can be the technical part of the job, the behavioral part of the job. And then in terms of confidentiality, I really recommend be in an office where there's a door shut. One of the corporations I worked with, it was all glass. It was a little hard for it to become, but be in a space where it is confidential between the manager and the employee, and just say, I have a concern about your performance. Here's what I've noticed. Is there something, what's going on for you? I want you to be successful here. And when they know how to approach an employee, and an employee sometimes will say it's something about the job, but other times they're going to say, yeah, I got a lot going on at home. I don't know what to do. That's an opportunity for a manager to say, okay, well, we have an EAP available. You can talk to a counselor to get some guidance, and then we can circle back and see if that helps you improve your performance. So managers, some, yes, look the other way. And I think mostly because they don't want to deal with it because they don't know how. And that's from my experience. And I got called back to that same large corporation's global part. Why? Because there was a huge layoff. And so they gave my name to all the HR managers to say, when you have an employee you're concerned about, we now have a resource. So I was the EAP resource. And Julie spoke about it. One of the HR managers called me, gave me the concern. The employee was missing in action at meetings. It was all remote, at not answering emails, whatever. She spoke to him. And in that conversation, she noted what was going on and her concern, and then said, you know what? I did seek help. I did seek help for anxiety, and I'm so glad I did. It was really helpful. I'm going to recommend you talk to Susan and see if you can get some help. It was life-changing for that man, that he heard, oh, the manager had anxiety too. Wow, I can get help. And so he was very open. We had an 1.5-hour session on the phone where he did reveal a lot of what was going on, triggering that depression, and ultimately went to the psychiatrist that the manager had told me about. I didn't tell him that, obviously. Got some medication, and it was life-changing for him. So, and
Well,
the other way, I'm
example. Thank
also
you.
now contracted with a company that does training for companies. So if the topic is something I've done before, like there was one, mental health in the workplace. Now, I didn't get a big crowd, but I'm okay with that because it was focused on depression, which led people to begin to say, well, what is it really? And the outline they gave me was very good, but my experience helped. Then they asked, well, what if I think somebody's depressed, what do I do? But it was those kind of trainings are a great opportunity to say you have an EAP. So companies in terms of wellness and education, I did stress management. I taught that for years, but that was, here's who I am. Yes, we have stress. Here's how to manage it. And here's your option for EAP. So when you provide in the rubric, I suppose, of wellness, whether it's stress management, I got asked like 3-4 years in a row, can you please do managing the stress of the holidays? But again, always had at least 15-20 people, which for wellness is usually a lot in a corporation. But then they all got to know each other, and they got to know, oh, EAP, I can talk to somebody about this. So I just wanted to add
Susan, we're
that
at the end of
input.
the hour, so I have to jump in. But
Okay,
that's
I'm
a
done.
wonderful
I'm done.
example, and I just wanted to close with thank you for everybody coming. And also, there's a big movement in Canada and the US and Australia and other countries around psychologically safe workplaces and regulations that are voluntary, coming from the governments in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Ireland, other places, that are really getting the attention of senior leaders and management, that they need to change their culture and they need to talk about workplace mental health as a safety issue so they don't get sued. Every province in Canada has a successful lawsuit suing employers for an unsafe psychologically unsafe workplace. So there are some bigger societal trends other than COVID that are pushing employers and managers to consider this part of their job, to create a psychologically safe and healthy workplace. And EAPs, I think, can be a big part of doing training and referrals, and the thing Susan was just talking about with great examples, making managers feel comfortable in approaching employees at risk and making that happen. And maybe we can learn from some of our colleagues in some of these other countries globally that are really taking a lead on this for us. Any other comments in the chat? Joel and I and Julie will look at that and maybe figure out some kind of response we could put in a future EPA member related resource. I'll leave it to you, Julie. Say goodbye.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Joel, Mark, and Julie, for joining us today. This is the first panel we've done, so striking out into new territory. Thank you so much, Jim Porter and Stress Stop, for sponsoring us today and making it possible. And we kick off again January 5th. We're going to talk about fentanyl with Zach Ludwig from Bradford Behavioral Health. So have a really great holiday, everybody. And we will see you in the new year.